Hey, good morning. I'm Patricia Murphy. It's Wednesday. This is Seattle Now. Whoo boy, there's been another shakeup on the city council. First-time council member Cathy Moore says she's resigning. It's the third vacancy in 2 years on the council. Publicola editor and publisher Erica Barnett is here to give us some insight into what the heck is going on at City Hall. But first, let's get you caught up. People who die in King County without financial means or family are laid to rest every few years in a special ceremony. Today, clergy from various denominations will gather to read the names of each person. The service begins at 10 a.m. at Mount Olivet Cemetery in Renton. It's open to anyone who wants to pay their respects. If you have ideas about how Seattle Public Schools should spend its money, you can share at a public hearing on the budget this afternoon. Seattle Public Schools was facing a projected shortfall of $100 million for the next school year. The state kicked in some money to close that gap for now, but school board officials say it's only a temporary fix and the district still faces major future budget issues. This afternoon's meeting is at 4:15. You can sign up online to give public testimony. And check out this new data about Seattle's population. According to the Seattle Times, the number of people between the ages of 25 and 34 has actually declined in recent years by about 5%. This is interesting because prior to the pandemic, that age group was booming here, increasing by 35% beginning in 2013. According to the paper, the age group with the biggest decline in the city are people between 55 and 64. Those folks declined by 15% since 2019. Check back for more headlines on tonight's episode of Seattle Now.
I'm going to take a point of personal privilege and request that we have police response. Our physical safety is being threatened by the actions of the demonstrators outside, banging on the windows, which could easily get broken, and we will have a mob scene. I'm asking for police presence to arrest those individuals.
That's Seattle City Council member Cathy Moore, 1 month into her first term on the council in February 2024. Asylum seekers protested the meeting, asking for the city to provide financial help for housing. Local protesters banged on the windows outside the council chambers, demanding that the money be taken from the police surveillance budget. 6 people were arrested. Now, almost a year and a half later, Cathy Moore is cutting her first term short. She's resigning, effective July 7th. Moore says she needs to focus on her health, adding that her District 5 constituents, quote, deserve a representative who can give their full attention to the critical issues facing the city and its neighborhoods. Moore is the third council member to vacate a seat in the past 2 years, and 3 seats are up for election in November. Publicola editor and publisher Erica Barnett is here to talk about Moore's decision and what the upset could mean for the council and its ability to govern. Erica, appreciate you taking the time.
Great to be here.
All right, well, let's start with Cathy Moore. She's stepping down. What did you learn about why she made this decision?
Well, as you said, she gave the explanation that she is going to focus on her health and personal reasons. She didn't specify what those personal reasons are. What I have heard from people familiar with her decision, she declined to talk to me, but what I've heard is that, she was very frustrated with the job itself, with the fact that public commenters often come and, yell at her, criticize her. The Seattle way, right? I mean, there's a healthy tradition of protest at city council. And from the very first month she was in office, she showed pretty clearly that she did not like that part of a job when she demanded that protesters be arrested in February of 2024 when they were banging on the walls. So this is probably a long time coming. Again, I don't have direct insight into her brain, but folks who do have a little more direct insight spoke with me, and they said that that was a big reason why.
Okay. Well, we can talk a little bit more about the raucous behavior of Seattle public commenters. But before we do, is this a big deal for the council at this point?
Yeah, it's a huge deal. This council just got elected, and I think that most of them are new. The vast majority are new, and the most tenured member, Dan Strauss, is in his second term. So this is a huge deal for a council that came in acting as though they had a huge mandate from the voters to completely change things around, to undo some of the biggest priorities of the previous council. And the fact that one of them has already bowed out after Tammy Morales, a member of the previous council, left at the beginning of this year, I think that is a massive deal. And I think it says something about this council's perhaps preparation or lack of familiarity with what the duties of the job include, which does include being yelled at by the public sometimes.
Moore will leave the seat about a year and a half into her first term. Let's talk about what she accomplished in that time.
I would say that her primary accomplishment in terms of passing legislation is that she managed to pass a bill that recriminalizes so-called prostitution loitering, which had not been on the books. The council overturned it, and with the help of the city attorney at the time, because it was considered just a very problematic practice to be arresting women who were working on the street. So she passed that. She passed, as part of that, the SOAP zone up on Aurora, which is stay out of areas of prostitution, where people can be banished from if they are accused of trying to pay for sex, not necessarily convicted of doing so, but that was probably her premier legislative accomplishment. She got some money in the budget for a receiving center for women who want to leave the sex trade. And she proposed a lot of stuff, but, I mean, frankly, a year and a half is not enough when you're a brand new council member to get a whole lot done.
That's a really good point. Moore also proposed a citywide capital gains tax late last year that did not get the majority it needed to pass. Her ethics code proposal, also particularly unpopular. You were in the chambers during public comment. What was it like in the council chambers during those hearings?
Well, I will tell you, having covered the city council for a long time, it was a sort of mini version of what it used to be like when Kshama Sawant, who was back in the mix at City Hall, was on the city council. She would bring in sometimes hundreds of people to chant and clap and yell and try to shout the council down. And now it's more like a dozen people, 20 people.
We have reached the end of our public comment period. It is now 3:07. And we've reached the end of our public comment period in order to get on with the rest of our agenda.
And they are doing the same thing. They're walking around the council chamber, sort of picket style, yelling, saying Cathy Moore must go, Maritza Rivera must go. They're being very disruptive.
Who needs to be thrown out? Cathy Moore! We're trying to under attack. What do we do?
Honestly, it's less than it used to be, and anyone who watched a council meeting from the previous council should have known that that was part of what sometimes went on at council meetings.
Now, I remember the Kshama Sawant days. It was raucous. You can always rely on vigorous, rigorous public comment from people in the city. As we've been talking about, this is part of the job. Is anything in that chamber, maybe it is less raucous? Is it too disruptive? Is the council being too heavy-handed when it comes to this public comment period?
Well, I think it is not productive, to say the least, to be one of the people shouting and trying to, and that is part of the point, right? They are trying to shout them down. I will say just real quickly, most of the people who are in council chambers have been full on this ethics bill, and most of the people are not doing that. They're giving public comment that is very negative toward Cathy Moore and her proposal because they don't like it. And they're being civil, and they're doing all the things that the council says they want people to do. Yeah, I think the council is being too heavy-handed because what they do when they have these 12 or 15 or 20 disruptive people is generally they cut comment off, and this is Sarah Nelson, the council president, cuts comment off at an hour, and then everybody goes crazy, and she pulls them back into their council offices, and they hold the meeting by Zoom, which is quite undemocratic, and it's a very weird experience to sit there in council chambers with no one there.
I have not seen this happen in other councils, and I've been in the city for
Never.
25 years now, watched council meetings for the majority of that time, have not seen this particular tactic from a council president before.
We have access to Zoom now, to be fair. I don't know how it would have worked before. They would have just had to shut down the meeting and reschedule it for a different time. But I don't remember that ever happening either. And we certainly had lots of protests. I mean, you probably remember the teen dance ordinance.
Oh, yes.
There were tons of very disruptive protests and intentionally disruptive. And again, disruption is part of protest. It is a way of protesting, and it's not illegal. But I haven't seen them ever retreat the way they have. And it's just a bad look. I mean, I think that in the future, council candidates or potential council candidates really should go and sit in on some council meetings and see what it's like.
It actually makes me wonder if council members receive any level of training to prepare for this, because anybody in a public job is going to be subject to public opinion. Is this something council members are briefed on?
I actually don't know if they are. I know they go through quite a lot of training in the beginning of their terms, and this council went through probably more than most. But I don't know. I mean, I think that's something that you just have to learn to deal with as a politician. I don't know that, other elected officials get training in how to deal with an angry public. But the city council, I mean, Seattle has a long and wonderful tradition of showing up to City Hall to say what they think. And I think that's great. And I think that is number 1, 2, and 3 on what you should know about the job, is that when you're holding public meetings, the public's going to show up.
What kind of message does Sarah Nelson send when she tamps down and tries to control this public comment in the way that she has?
I think it's a very hostile message. I think it's saying we don't really care what you say unless it's positive. And that might not be her intent. I don't know her intent, but I think it is a very poor way to handle it from a public relations perspective and from the perspective of getting people to stop showing up and yelling, because it's certainly not doing that. It's doing the opposite.
We're approaching the middle of the term for some of these first-time council members. We talked, you and I, in early 2024 about their inexperience. Have they seasoned a bit? What have you noticed?
I think they have seasoned a bit. I think while they still have a tendency to propose legislation sort of out of the blue. I mean, even Dan Strauss proposed this legislation that would require earplugs at clubs. Bob Kettle today just proposed legislation that I believe came from the city attorney's office to crack down even more on graffiti. So they're definitely still doing that. But I think that I've noticed that they have tempered their criticism of the previous council. They're not as obsessed with that as they were in the first year. My co-host of the Seattle Nice podcast, Sandeep Kaushik, and I are always arguing over whether this is the do-nothing council. And they have done some things, but they've also had a lot of legislation that they've had to pull back because of public opposition that they didn't anticipate. So I think their job now is, if they want to be effective, is to anticipate the public.
The timing of Moore's resignation is interesting. The filing deadline for this year's election was last month. What does her resignation now mean for that open seat?
Well, it means that the person who fills that open seat, and there's going to be a process that starts 20 days after Cathy Moore's resignation date, which is July 7th. That person is going to serve for about a year and a half, potentially a little bit more, or around the same amount of time that Cathy Moore herself, who was elected, will serve. So we're going to have an unelected city council member representing District 5. And I will say it is somewhat ironic that the argument that Cathy Moore made for the ethics rollback was that people would not be represented if she or any other council member had to recuse themselves on any vote. By resigning, she is depriving her constituents of elected representation. So it is inherently anti-democratic to have an appointed person in there. Sometimes it's necessary, but this is going to be for a really long time. And if she had done this before the filing deadline, people could have filed to actually run for this office in November of this year.
So much churn. We have an interim appointment in Mark Solomon, 3 council seats in the mayor's office on the ballot this year. Where does this leave us with the current council and their ability to govern?
I mean, I think it shows that this is not a job that people either want or find themselves happy in once they get it. And it may be an impossible job in some ways. But I think this council is, I mean, we will see how they handle the budget. That's the next big challenge that they will face in starting in August. I do think it gets to their ability to govern. I've seen a lot of very slow action on legislation. The comprehensive plan was supposed to be done last year. It's not going to happen. They're not even taking it up now until next year. So I do think that at the end of these folks' first terms, I mean, we are going to look back and say, what did they accomplish for the first 2 years? And who knows what they're going to accomplish in the next 2. But it is very, very slow going on this council.
Certainly no shortage of issues in the city that need council members to help settle them, Erica Barnett. Really appreciate you taking the time. Erica Barnett is the editor and publisher of Publicola, probably seen more city council meetings than 99% of the people in this city. Really appreciate it, Erica. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Seattle Now. Today's episode was produced by Vaughn Jones. It was edited by Caroline Chamberlain Gomez. Our production team also includes Brooklyn Jamerson Flowers, Andy Hurst, and Paige Browning. Greg Kramer does our theme music. Seattle Now and KUOW Public Radio are members of the NPR network. I'm Patricia Murphy. See you soon.